Hello, everybody. It is not Thursday. It is
No,
actually Tuesday. We have shifted our episode this week of Thinking on Paper. Welcome again as two writers explore Web3. My name's Jeremy. This is
and my
Mark.
name's Mark. Yeah, just the two of us today, Jeremy, making
It's fitting. It's
castles in
Valentine's
the
Day.
sand.
It's
Yeah,
Valentine's Day.
exactly.
It's two. We're not a thruple today. It's
We're
just
not a
two.
throuple. It's still very romantic, which is actually where maybe this was all lost under a barrage of Super Bowl and Rihanna posts. Where are all the chocolate companies and the flower companies? Where's Interflora with their NFT Web3 experiment? Have I missed all that, or are they just not? Because what's more of the ultimate experience? Why are they not doing any experiments with NFTs? And what would they look like?
It's a great question. One thing I saw that was super cool was I can't remember what brand was doing it, but one brand was like allowing you to give your ex I think it was a chocolate covered scorpion. I can't remember what brand it was, but I was like, that's pretty interesting, man.
Is that for just for this Valentine's Day?
I think so.
I
I'll
like
have to
that.
look it up and see what's going on.
Yeah,
Hey
correct.
guys in the chat, jump in, say hi, introduce yourselves. We're so our episode today, we shifted a little bit due to some very important travel.
My fault.
Um, we're both dads, so we're dads that relish in the time with our kids. So Mark's kids are off on Thursday. So Mark, enjoy your
Thank
time. Where are
you.
you guys headed? What are you doing?
We're heading to Albertville, which is a small town in the French Alps, and we're gonna go to eat junk food and walk around the city.
Amazing. All right, well, bring back at least one picture of Albertville. It sounds very interesting.
Albertville actually was where the 1992 Winter Olympics were held. 1992, I think it was 1992. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
So
there
yeah.
you go.
So pardon my American ignorance on that one. Albertville is actually a pretty storied place.
Yeah, it's storied. It's not the most beautiful, but it's storied. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, hey, so guys, here's what we're doing with this episode. We're shaking it up a little bit. We've had the fortunate pleasure to talk with some amazing people from, Dasez Scott to Theo Priestley to Joe Belliotti to, you name it. And we've got so many more amazing guests coming up. But it's like trying to be so succinct and respectful of your time as a listener, but also, our guest time as well. We try to limit the discussion to like 40 minutes or so, right? So there's so
Yeah.
many different nuggets that we could have probably unpacked quite a bit more depth. So this is our rabbit hole episode where we kind of take a look back, and I think we'll do these every so often, right, Mark? Is that the plan, depending
I,
on feedback?
I think it's a great idea. I don't know about you, but my memory is pretty spectacularly bad. So just going through the list, I don't know if you remember all of our guests: Justin Sloan, Theo Priestley, and Marshall Van Jensen, Nolan Ether, Keir Finlow Bates, Joe Belliotti, Sam Simmons, Dasez Scott. Am I missing anybody? I don't think so. I think we should do
No,
it
did you
every
say
school
Nolan? Did
holidays.
you say Nolan?
Yeah, Nolan
Okay,
was
yeah,
there
yeah.
between Sam
Mhm.
and Keir. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we do every school holidays, kind of do a catch up of the talking points and the interesting topics we kind of started.
I love it. So guys, we're going to test something out. I've got a couple of clips from our old shows that we're going to use to kind of spark some of the discussion. I don't have clips for all the shows, just due to me learning Restream a little bit more. But I'm going to pull up a couple, and then we'll chat about them. Let's see if this thing works. Hang tight.
Things that only come from doing the actual work. You can't get around it. It's that 10,000 hours thing. You can't get around it. You can't. So I may have 10,000 hours as a creative director, 10,000 hours as a music producer, but I also have, let's say, 8,000 hours as an event coordinator. I have 6,000 hours as a, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of things where it's you can't get around the work. There's certain things that can only come from doing the work, and there's certain things that you can only know from doing the work.
So Mark, the one thing that stood out to me about this, and just with emerging tech in general, there's almost no excuse to not dive in and start making things, right? There are all kinds of platforms that help you put visual images together. There are all kinds of platforms that help you license music. There are coding platforms. If you don't know, how to code basic stuff, there's Fiverr. There are all of these different tool sets that allow you to kind of come in. So it's not like, oh man, I've got this idea, but I really don't know how to pull it off. I think that's a really interesting thing to explore, especially with Web3. What do you think? How did that hit you?
Just to the audience, I didn't know Jeremy was going to pull some parts from previous chats, and I didn't know he was going to bring up that one, because it's funny, because on my notes for the show, the first thing I wrote was a kind of about global lessons about all our guests that they all have in common, and it's outside of Web3. It's not connected to Web3, and it's hard work. Nothing beats hard work. Like every guest we've spoken to, whether it was Kia, he was writing his book until 2:00 in the morning. We had Justin Sloan's written 50 books. He'd wake up every day at 5:00 and write. And Dasez didn't sleep for 20 years, I don't think. And I think that was it's very poignant that you brought that up, because there's no escaping hard work, as Dasez said. And yeah, Web3 it's all work, isn't it? I mean, how much really do we know? And one of the things that Dasez also talked about was this kind of alley of power, I think he called it.
Power alley. The power alley.
Power alley, yeah. Focusing on what you know and talking about what you know. And in Web3, that's so small that anyone's power alley is tiny. So you have to work, don't you, to learn if you want to create music, create videos, create metaverse experiences. You're totally right. You have to put in the hours, but equally, the resources are there, and it's easy to find where to put your time. I guess the hard thing is deciding what you want to learn and what you want to do.
Absolutely. And, I think it would be really interesting if we try and thread our discussion today between different guest experiences. So my mind automatically goes to a conversation that we had with Nolan Ether, where we talked about, what makes digital experiences meaningful. And what we got down this thread of was like, it goes back to the original technology of storytelling, right? And if story's not there, a means to emotionally connect with whatever you're doing, whatever the project is, however people interact with the project, it's got to have a meaningful story, right? So how does that hit you as a writer?
You have to have story. I get Nolan was awesome, wasn't he, in explaining the power of story in Web3. Okay, I'll talk about story. So, and Web3, because this week I finally got my story. So I've been working on a book, and I finally got the third cover finished of Apocalypse Daddy. And I'm going to do an experiment, Jeremy, and I'm going to do a Web2 versus Web3 storytelling experiment, and to see, kind of taking a lot about what Nolan said about true fans and using your storytelling to connect, and seeing if it works if it's easier in Web3 to tell a story. Storytelling, everyone speaks about it, but is it different in Web2 to Web3? I don't think so. I think it's as old as time, isn't it? It doesn't change anything.
Well, if we talk
fail
about
everywhere,
you go back as a writer, most of us have probably spent some time wrestling with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and the beats of the story and arcs and all of that stuff. And that is like, that's an original means and methodology, right? With all of this stuff. So absolutely, I think it could apply in Web3. So is your idea to take a story and bring it to life in two different ways, the same story?
Yeah, essentially that. Yes, see if I can IP. I mean, I'm in quite a fortunate position where I'm getting approached by different, I don't even know what they're called, really, kind of Web3 story platforms where creators can create their own IP and use NFTs to build out that IP. And yeah, I'm going to experiment with the Apocalypse Daddy. I'm going to do it in Web 2. I'm going to do it in Web 3. I'm going to see how it changes both the storytelling and how I interact or sell with the audience, because it's all about selling, really. So that's what I'm
totally. So all right. So here's the nerd part of my brain spinning up in this whole equation. What are you going to use to capture the data and the reactions and the interaction to get the knowledge back of, what worked in interesting ways and why, what was better, what was not so good? What are your plans there?
Growth hacking. Yeah, I'm going to speak to some people who know more about growth hacking than I do, because data and analyzing that is one of my weakest points. So I'll have to speak to some people. If you have any recommendations, maybe Nolan, since he's here.
Man, I don't know if Tom Estella is in the chat or the call. He is a lacrosse player buddy of mine. We play lacrosse together, and but he's also a brilliant data science guy. He might be a really cool guy to chat with about that. Tom, if you're somehow watching or in the chat, chime in, and maybe we can connect you with Mark.
I put that question back onto you, Jeremy, because I don't know if you're like me, but I'm just scared, intimidated, uninterested, because I'm scared and intimidated in data. You have it on LinkedIn, you have it on Twitter, you have it I have it on my blogs, where I can see and track how many visitors, when they come, what they like, what they like to read, what they don't read. And I don't really look at it, because what I just said. Do you?
It wears me out, dude. Like, to have to think about how to look at all the back end stuff. I'm a big believer in doing things without expectation and letting my curiosity lead me in whatever I'm doing. And I don't think, and I'm going to stop myself, but I'm still going to say the thing I was going to say. Like, I don't think I have time for it. I do have time for it. I can certainly make time. But I would rather partner with somebody that could help me with that kind of stuff and stay in my power alley, right? My power alley is not looking at data and categorizing it and translating that into insights, but there's a lot of people that are really, really good at that.
Yeah, and then acting, I guess, and then acting on that data and making one of the things we've spoken about with quite a few of our guests. I know with Joe, I think Sam, Nolan, Van as well. We spoke about true fans, and it's quite a common trope in Web3, true fans. And one of the things which I wrestle with is, how many fans do you need to get 1,000 fans? How many fans do you need to connect with? How many people? I mean, everyone says 100. It's not very many. But if 1% of the people you connect with are becoming your true fans, you're still looking at tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that you need to connect with to get that 100 or that 1,000, however you measure that success. And Web3, is it? I know that Film 3 is kind of having this problem where there just isn't the audience to get that true fan base. And I think that we're kind of, if you take Rihanna, there's a big story about Rihanna. I've mentioned her already, but everyone is talking about Rihanna, and Rihanna could launch the world's tiniest NFT on a pinhead that you can't see of a tennis ball, and it would sell out, because she has that fan base, but it doesn't matter where. But most of us don't. And I wonder how do we build those true fan bases in Web3 when we have, with all the data, when we don't have a wide audience to take from? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. No. It does. It does. And it goes back to this word I've been chucking, or this collection of words I've been chucking into a lot of these different conversations with this, bi-directional value exchange, right? So
I've trademarked that for you, Jeremy.
I saw the TM on that. That's amazing. That's amazing. But with these larger artists, and I think, some of them are kind of trying to look and see how this can help, but they're already at scale, right? So if you're at scale, it's a numbers game. It's a a little bit to a lot, right? But for the smaller folks like you and I, who don't have Rihanna's fan base yet, although she's a much better singer than me, the idea is to enable these new types of connections, right? And basically allow fans to kind of participate a little bit deeper in the discussion. And actually, this let me pull up this clip from I think it was Joe who mentioned the idea of being the idea that this technology will allow us to be a little bit closer to our fans. Let's listen to Joe real quick.
Do you see a time where the sonic identity of a brand is in fact hundreds of different sonic identities? That the
lifestyle, like my tagline for my brand was, it's a life, heads for dreads, it's a lifestyle, not a hairstyle.
I saw that, like it.
Right?
Do you see a time where the sonic identity of a brand is in fact hundreds of different sonic identities that the user themselves creates or chooses depending on how they experience and feel about the brand? Yeah, I'm just very interested in this kind of like personal, the hyper personalization of it all.
So so we all know that I may be a decent interview guy and a host, co-host, but maybe not so much a live stream producer. That was the wrong clip. But that's an interesting one to talk about as well. I've got the other one that I can upload. Let's pivot a little bit.
That was the right clip, wasn't it? It was two clips because it broke into Dasez and then went back to Joe.
So Joe's clip, that was, I have another clip from Joe that speaks to the closer to the fan, and let's come back to that. But this is an interesting discussion too, because this brings an audience closer to the brand or the artist in a way. You mentioned something really interesting in that, where you know, what if the brand assets, let's just say, you know, like a logo, like a sonic ID, and let's talk about like a major brand instead of an artist. Of course, this is translatable to artists. But what if this collection of assets, the brand allowed you as an audience or as a super fan of their audience, right, to come in and experience that in a way where you lean in and do some arranging of those assets, or you lean in and put a little flavor on how those come to life with guidelines and rules, right? There's always a brand book, there's always visual identity governance, sonic identity governance. But I thought that was really interesting. How could we unpack that a little more? And do you think brands would be open to saying, hey, Mark, here are my assets, you know, create your own unique experience with them?
Yeah, that question. Okay, power alley time. My favorite brands are snowboarding brands and skateboarding brands, really. That's kind of, and guitars to a lesser extent. I think they lend themselves to that kind of hyper personalization. So I can't speak for other brands, but my favorite snowboarding boards and clothing, that would be really, really cool to be able to change the assets. Whether that, I mean, what kind of assets are you thinking about changing though? What are we focusing on here? What might those assets look like?
Well, I think it comes down to, so Joe mentioned something interesting in that conversation too, that, and this is specific to music, but I think it's applicable to other assets, other points of engagement, right? Where that experience could be pulled in, and I don't know, maybe it's colors, maybe it's logos, but it's also tied into like moods and moments. You know, Joe talked about moods and moments and pairing moods and moments with music and brand and all of that stuff. Why not pair moods and moments with this collection of assets that a brand might have with your mood and your moment, and letting you express that in a way that might resonate with other people in the brand or other people outside of the brand? Little risky, right? Like,
yeah, a little risky, but okay, you're wearing a surf. What is it? I can't.
McKevlin's, Folly Beach, South Carolina.
Folly Beach, South Carolina. It's a surf shop. Okay, surfing, snowboarding. This is where your mood does change. Okay, I can talk about what I know. If it's a powder day, then your mood's going to be much more stoked than if it's cold and there's no snow. On surfing, big waves, you're going to get different emotions, and then you're going to, I guess we're talking about social media, maybe the metaverse one day, where you're in there and you're representing your brand, and the identity of that brand changes based on your mood. Some brands are going to be much more open to that than others, obviously. And I think it depends on the industry that brand's operating in as to how open they will be to it. But yeah, the idea of personalizing we're talking about avatars, aren't we? We're talking about your NFTs. We're talking about your kind of online presence in the future. Then yeah, a lot of brands are very precious about their identity, and I don't think that will change.
Wouldn't you say artists are hold their whatever they put out as their songs, their art, that's essentially precious as well, right? That's something
Yeah.
that they use as a signifier, right, of what they're creating, and something that fans and audiences can jump into. I think there's an interesting parallel with brands and their output, and then artists and musicians and their output. It's kind of a similar, they're seeking to push something out that they created to generate some sort of emotional response. And if the emotional response was able to morph based on the emotion that individual was going through, that could be really interesting. Super complicated, but interesting, right?
Okay, well, who was our guest? Hold on, let me check.
Joel, mood rings and brands. That's amazing. I love that idea. Joel in the chat, what's up, man?
Who was our first or second guest, Jeremy? And he was building the metaverse audio experience, the immersive audio.
Alex Kane. Yeah, with Volta XR.
Volta. Again, he was talking about, and I paraphrase because it was very complex what he was talking about, but essentially kind of these immersive audio landscapes merging and changing and evolving as your emotional mood, as your mood changes. And that would maybe, if you could, is that an extension of this whereby brands could be linked into the audio sphere using these sonic identities, which they can change depending on the mood of the people who are walking around these augmented realities?
Yeah, so going a little bit deeper. So check this out. So I don't know that we got into this discussion with Alex, but shout out to Alex. Volta XR, amazing platform for kind of live streaming, capture, and basically porting artists into these new and interesting worlds that you can affect and change the visuals based on how the music is going. Volta XR. But he also did another experiment where he put an fMRI machine on his head and use that to translate a piece of music as what the signals that he was having in his head. And basically it's all electrical signals, right? Not to get too crazy and goofy, but the brain has different brain waves, alpha, theta, beta, and I can't quite remember the last one, but there's all different
Gamma
frequencies. That might be it. But they're all different frequencies, and they're electrical resonance, right? Just like music is, right? So there was an interesting tie-in to let what was going on in your brain drive a musical output. So I think artists, I think musicians obviously would probably be more willing to experiment with this. And I think there's some companies out there, Pixelinks, if you don't know about those guys, I think they're partnered with Animoca, but Pixelinks does a lot of music game experience design. And I think one of their future iterations talks about the ability to let an artist or a fan drive a music palette instead of a song. They could kind of have access to all these pieces and parts and be able to generate their own experiences with that. So I think it's coming.
A musical palette. What do you mean by musical palette?
So here's my Tune Welders, music producer, music supervisor hat kind of coming on. But like whenever we do music for film or television, and I'm involved in that stuff, we always try to create what we call a sound palette, which is like a collection of sounds that you will use to create the film score or the television music or whatever it is. You're trying to kind of land in a world. It's like, does this world make sense? This kind of marimba and cello and, super guitar looped, ground looped electric guitar. Like, does that create what we want to have happen before we're actually writing notes and making music? So these little pieces and parts, it's just like colors, when a painter is painting, with their color palette, they have these ingredients to make stuff with. So to me, with Web3, I think what we can do is start thinking about how we can encapsulate the ingredients and provide access to those ingredients for unique rearrangement by people outside the original creators, right?
So with musicians, if you have an NFT collection which links you to the artist, so that the real hardcore fans can have some kind of interaction with the collaborative process. But obviously, the musicians aren't going to let most people write their songs, but they could give a palette. So okay, the community gives a genre. We want a soft song, we want a hard song, we want a melodic song, we want a raucous, like industrial garage sound, or kind of give the ingredients, and then the artist would create based on those prerequisites that the community have asked for.
So that's one way to do it. Another project that I've been working on, I don't know that we've talked much about this, but it's a project I've been working on for like the last couple of years, just in concept, but now it's really coming into like, I'm now starting to, I've got a developer that's helping me, code it, and visual designer and all of that. But take the flip side of that and say, well, what if the artist created these Lego blocks, right? And these Lego blocks were little pieces of a potential new song, right? And this is not rearranging old stems. This is creating new music and arranging them in Lego blocks and allowing you just to arrange the Lego blocks. The Rihanna's not going to say, "Hey, Mark, come play this bass line on my record," right? Even though you might be an okay bass player, Rihanna has probably contacts to the best studio musicians in the world. She probably has a bass player that she loves working with. You never know. You could flip the script, but having that control of these assets, right, with ownership and permissions locked in, the ability to rearrange those assets is a unique experience for you as a fan, but also the artist is protected, that their creative IP is carefully fenced in, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay, I like the sounds of that. So it's a bit like we've mentioned this before, and it's the create your own musical adventure almost. Something similar is happening with literary NFTs, and whereby you create the IP and then you give your community, your fans, a choice of where the story goes. And so you're imagining something similar with music.
Absolutely. And I actually have the right Joe clip is now queued up. Let's listen to it. So we talked about the whole stem of this conversation started with us discussing having fans being closer to the experience, having this bi-directional value exchange. Let's listen to this from Joe real quick. TM.
Those platforms serve a great purpose. And I think if you look at Spotify, iHeart, Instagram, any platform, I really feel like you're a little further away from the artist than you are, than you could be with these new technology applications. Meaning that, like, when I listen to Spotify, I have no connection to the artist. There's no interaction, there's no social ability, there's really nothing. I have a connection to Spotify, the platform, which is great. But, if you look at NFTs, you look at these technologies, how can they help me as a super fan become closer to the artist if I want to be closer to the artist, right? Almost like going back to fan club days, or things that, like, how do I get something that I can't get from the listening experience? How do I get something, that brings me, gives me this more intimate dynamic with the artist? I think that's an interesting approach if that can happen.
I think it chimes into what we've been kind of saying on that. Well, we've maybe beat the closer to the fan, closer to the artist dead horse a little bit. Let's flip the script and get a little more technical. So Keir, Finlow Bates, what an amazing opportunity to talk to a guy who knows this stuff top to bottom, the actual technology, right, that powers a lot of this stuff. And one thing stood out to me. We got on the conversation of databases versus blockchain, right? And how a lot of Web3 stuff, I always ask the question, why does it need to be on chain? What's the benefit of it being on chain? And Keir said something that was really, really interesting, coming from a guy who is very blockchain forward, that if you can do it on a database, you should do it on a database, right? You should do it on a database first. But then the flip side of that is like, all right, the difference is a database has an admin who has what he called godlike control over the database. Sure, you can, get down to table level and have different admins for tables, and not to get too technical. But the idea on the blockchain is you have kind of this individual level permission and access to a piece of the pie, where the whole pie is the database controlled by the baker, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I like that analogy. Yeah.
What did you think of Curious? What stood out to you with? I know you went down kind of a writing question line of questioning with him. What were your thoughts there?
Well, okay, just back to your point on using the blockchain and not using the blockchain, or you don't need to for a lot of the use cases that are out there. And I know that NFT ticketing has its naysayers and it has its backers, and a lot of the naysayers are you don't need it. You don't need NFT tickets because you don't need to have as NFTs. And one of the things I like about that is that it just makes it more entertaining. So this is entertainment layer that you can add in, which traditional methods don't have. And I think that's very important, the entertainment factor that you can add in with these technologies, even if the technology itself does not solve the problem or present anything new. The entertainment layer is, and as a cultural addition, I think that's very important. I mean, a piece of paper versus cool NFTs. I mean, it's base level. It's that. But Keir, his writing. I was very interested in how he wrote a book in. Did he say 2 weeks? Did he write Evil Tokenomics? I think he said
it was quick.
It was like quicker than like Jack Kerouac on the road. He was like just in his loft in Finland banging out this book in 2 weeks, and his work ethic, the way that he was thinking about writing was very interesting. I'm sure that most people in the chat follow him on LinkedIn, and you get a very good snapshot of the quality of his writing. And I think that our podcast is called Thinking on Paper, and we're a big adherence to that. If you think clearly, you write clearly. And I think Keir is the best example of someone who's thinking clearly and writing clearly.
Absolutely. And one interesting thing he did, a little tool that he put it it's more of a thought experiment, is the story was told through a scammer, right? Through the perspective of a scammer, which is not, Keir is not that, but in order to like really get his head around all of this and explain it in a very entertaining way, right? Because you're getting a peek into like some shady stuff through this character, right? So I think that's an interesting way to tell the story too, right?
Yeah, it's like the anti-hero, isn't it? It's the anti-hero storytelling technique whereby he tells the story through the eyes of in evil tokenomics. It's the millionaire scammer, and it's a very interesting turn on the traditional storyline. I forgot what I was going to say about Keir, but I'm sure it was good.
He was great. I think we could have another discussion with him and continue to unpack some stuff. I do.
That was my question for you, Jeremy.
Oh,
just quickly on Keir. So he has how does, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying he's pretty old school. Okay, he's building a big audience. His audience is going to be on Web2. He sells his books on Amazon. He said to us that he wasn't really interested in these Web3 publishing platforms yet because he didn't trust the longevity of them. He didn't think that many of them would be around, didn't know which one, etc. How does he, in 5-10 years, take his audience to Web3? I think that's something that has been spoken about but not really addressed. I know there's like one platform maybe that offers it. How should we think about that?
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting point, and we've seen a lot of stuff in the news recently about platforms going under, and the platform basically saying, yeah, sorry, if your NFT is on this platform, sorry, it's going away. We're shutting down. We didn't. We don't have enough money to keep going.
Not so immutable.
Right. So that was a really good point that I listened to that this morning too. And he was like, you got to be really careful what platform to engage in and put your stories on, right? Because if you put your stories on a certain platform that you can't export and land on any platform you want, that's a bit challenging. I think, to answer your question, from my perspective, ultimately Web3 gives a potential opportunity for creators to actually build their own world instead of going on someone else's platform. They are the platform, right? So to engineer that yourself, a little more costly, but I think as tools come out, there's going to be the ability to say, hey, Mark, come into the Jeremy world. Here's what's going on in the Jeremy world. He does some story stuff. He does some music stuff. He's got a couple of tech things that he's building, but this is like the central stage for experiences with me and my fans to interact with me. So I think if in general, I think if people start thinking about how to become their own platform, and as the tech and the tool set gets better to do that, it's gonna become easier. I mean, right now it's still a little clunky and you got to figure all this stuff out. And you, but I think that's what I would say.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
I've got one more clip I want to pull up, and then let's hit some quick hot buttons before we have to leave. But this came from Dasez again, and hopefully I'm pulling up the right one as I'm earning my stripes as live stream producer here. But he talked about the concept of livity, and I thought that was a really interesting way to think about community, right? Because people have these projects right now that they push out. The tech is there. There's an interesting nuance, but the community is not there. And it's like, oh, well, we'll just build the community. Well, I think it's a little bit different because not all community have what Dasez calls livity. So let's listen to him real quick.
Lifestyle, like my tagline for my brand was, it's a life, heads for dreads, it's a lifestyle, not a hairstyle.
I saw that, like it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So with that, it's a lifestyle. So anything in the lifestyle, whether it's ITEL food, whether it's, concerts and ganja or whatever it is, if it's in the lifestyle, they're tapped in, they're ready to tap in because it's life. It's not like we call it a livity. You know what I mean? It's not life, it's it's alive. The lifestyle is alive itself.
That's pretty powerful, man. Like and it goes back to extending things that are already super meaningful, right? So in the case of Dasez with crypto rastas and reggae culture, there is a lifestyle, there is a livity around that already. And how do you extend that livity into new experiences with bidirectional value exchange, TM, and these digital experiences, right? So livity, I think now there should be a new mechanic to evaluate the level of livity that communities have. I think it's really interesting.
It's very interesting, and my view of that is that most communities don't have much livity, or most brands. I mean, it's very how many brands have livity? How many communities have livity? Yeah, reggae, ganja, hip hop, rock, skate, some fashion brands. I think lifestyle brands have all the livity, don't they? I mean, how do non-lifestyle
Well, livity,
brands?
here's the big thing. Livity cannot be engineered. Livity is an emergent phenomenon, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, some brands can lock into and partner with communities that already have livity. Some brands have such a powerful ethos that there is innate livity in there too. But you can't go Willy Wonka style and go into a lab and say, yeah, this is my livity machine. We're just going to spin this stuff up, right?
Well, okay, is that why brands are experimental with NFT collaboration? I mean, and piggybacking on the livity of these communities, or I know a lot of fashion brands or luxury brands are piggybacking on street culture, aren't they? And I guess, yeah, if you can't create your own livity, then you borrow somebody else's livity.
Yeah, and like Joe said too, you have to be careful with how that comes to life, right? Because there can be an inauthentic
Yeah.
result or inauthentic perception when someone partners with a part of culture and does it in the wrong way, or it's almost like this appropriation kind of thing that happens. And, that immediately is a turnoff. So you almost have to like let the partnership be somewhat serendipitous and let that kind of emerge and grow instead of just saying, hey, Mark Fielding's a, EDM guy that, plays live guitar over it. It's great. It's awesome. He's got this whole community. I want to sell products to that. Mark, I'm just going to grab your audience. You're cool. Here's some money. And, maybe that might get me a couple of sales. Maybe that might get you a couple of new looks, but that's not going to be anything, amazingly amplifying any of our missions. Right.
No. And especially in Web3, where the NFT community is kind of, everyone is super sensitive to inauthenticity. I mean, at the moment, especially now after last year, where a lot of the surface scum has been taken out of the communities, where now everyone is hyper vigilant of inauthenticity, and any brands which are inauthentic and have demonstrated it recently, mentioning no names, then they're very quickly isolated, identified, and essentially, forced out.
Absolutely. Hey, Joel, to answer your question, I have the C+ players guide on deck. It's on my book list. I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm super interested to see that perspective. I actually captured a link, so I'll let you know when I dive into it. Maybe we can riff on it a little bit. Mark, looks like a couple minutes away from another lovely Valentine's episode of Thinking on Paper. What else do we want to cover? What else is on your mind?
Quickly, Sam Simmons, what did you take out of that conversation? Let's do a little snippet on the other people we haven't really mentioned. Okay, what did you take out of the Sam Simmons conversation?
So I'm just looking at my notes over here because I made some today. So one thing I took out from Sam's is this idea. He mentioned a spectrum of centralization, right? Which the kind of the smart projects are giving people the ability to sort of choose their own adventure in that perspective. So let's say, Mark, you're a little more conservative. You like to be able to, kind of like when something happens on a credit card, you just call the credit card people and be like, hey, handle this for me. I'm okay with offloading, my privacy for the ability of you handle anything going wrong. Right. But then maybe me on the other hand is like, I don't want anybody locked into that. I want to have my own stuff. I'll keep track of my own stuff. I'll have some personal responsibility, even though it's more complex. My trade-off is there, but you and I can both participate in that community based on our own terms. I think that was a really interesting thing that he mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was vitally important. Because me personally, I wouldn't call my credit card company because I'd be too scared that there'd be something other issue that I'd have to deal with. But yeah, a lot of people want that peace of mind, and they will sacrifice decentralization for that peace of mind. And I think that is a human, cultural, psychological, philosophical question that people just go decentralization and they don't think about it.
Well, it goes back to fear and security, right? And how those things are played in the large swath of culture, right? And whether it's a political system or whether it's a philosophical construct, I think those pieces and parts kind of float into all of the stuff we do as well. What jumped out at you with Sam?
I liked when he was speaking about Discord killers and some of the investment opportunities or things he'd seen VC wise about Discord killers that incorporate DAO mechanisms, voting, and how it was very interesting to him talk about these things, that they are being built, that they are being created, but it's a long way off. And Discord is actually, from what I read earlier, increasing in popularity. So yeah, the two sides.
So it's interesting. Yeah. So I usually am like, man, I can't stand Discord. It's so noisy and whatever. But how much of it is the tool and how much of it is the implementation and management of the tool, right? I was in a Discord the other day that was very well organized, very well managed, and I knew exactly where to go for the things I wanted to do within that community. So I may be starting to change my tune slightly on that.
Yeah. Well, and obviously with Sam is also, he didn't win that poker tournament he was in, by the way. I saw he finished outside of the outside of the money. So he didn't win $1 million, and he wasn't on a boat the following Monday.
Can't win if you don't play, man.
Can't win it. Yeah, you got to be in it to win it. Exactly. Just a question. You mentioned C+ Players Guide. I don't know what that is. This book, do you know this book, Jeremy? I know we've spoken a lot about music and brands.
Sonic Boom. No.
Okay.
Joel Beckerman, is that the guy from Made Music? He's like the Sonic Identity guy, I think, or one of the early folks that came up with the concept of Sonic Identities, I think, or at least executed on it.
I don't know. I bought it in lieu of our conversation with Joe. It's another book that was recommended for me, so I haven't read it yet, so I don't know. But I thought you might have read it. It's kind of
I've heard of Joel before.
Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well,
yep.
You might want to check that out. Sonic Boom.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, guys, we're actually a little bit over our time. Look at us talking our faces off. But hey, I think this is an interesting experiment. We'll work on the technical execution of this. I think I like the idea of using old clips to spark these discussions and look back, because the guys and girls we talk to that are just amazing, right? And they've done really cool things, and we don't have all the time to dive into the weeds on that stuff. So this is the rabbit hole.
The rabbit hole, and I am Alice, and you are the Mad Hatter.
Well played, sir. Well played, sir. Guys, thanks for joining. This has been Thinking on Paper, the Rabbit Hole edition. Jeremy Gilbertson and Mark Fielding. We will see you at our regularly scheduled time next week with a new guest.
Yeah, just before we go, we might next week we might be having everyone's favorite Marvel writer next week. So
little teaser. I like the teasers. Yeah. All right.
Big show.
Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thanks for checking it out. Mark, good to see you again. Enjoy your time off on Thursday.
See you. Bye.
Bye.